Okay, over the next couple of days, we're going to be talking about how do we write an equation in slope-intercept form, point-slope form, and standard form. All right, given certain information. Now, we can write an equation in slope-intercept form, point-slope form, and standard form given the slope, point on a line, x-intercept, y-intercept. But different forms make it easier to write given certain information. And what I mean by that is when we deal with slope-intercept form, for instance, that's y equals mx plus b. We can obviously see in the slope-intercept form, the slope. We can easily identify the slope. And we can also easily identify the y-intercept because the y-intercept is given by our b. So when we see a problem that has this information, it's easy to write it in slope-intercept form. Over the next couple of days, we will talk about point-slope form, and that it's easier when we have slope and a point to write things in slope-intercept form. And for standard form, it's easiest when we have x-intercept and y-intercept. For now, we're going to focus on slope-intercept form. All right, so let's begin. Our directions say, write an equation of the line given the information below. Particularly, we're going to focus on writing these equations in slope-intercept form. So, let's start if we have a slope and a point. All right, with problem 1, we're given the slope of -3 and a y-intercept of 4. So, if we remember that our slope is m and our y-intercept is b, then all this is a plug and chug deal. We write y equals, and instead of m, we're going to write -3 because m stands for slope, and that's what we're given in this problem. And we're going to write plus the y-intercept, which is b, so 4. And we're done with writing that equation. All right, we're going to do the next problem. Y equals 1/5x, and 1/5 because that's our slope, our m. And then now it's going to be a minus because of this -5, so -5. See how easy it is to write an equation in slope-intercept form if we have the slope and the y-intercept? Let's talk about problem number 3. We are given that the slope is -1 and the y-intercept is 0. So when we plug this into the equation, we have y equals, and for our m, we're going to write -1x. And for our b, we can write 0, so plus 0. You probably won't ever see an equation in this form because it's always simplified to y equals just -x. -x because -1 times x is just -x, and -x plus 0 is just -x. So we use this form, y equals -x. All right, I'm going to leave the last one for you to do. Now, what if we have a table and we want to write an equation in slope-intercept form? Remember yesterday, we talked about the fact that when we're dealing with the y-intercept, we can define it as the value of y when x equals 0. All right, the value of y when x equals 0. Well, how is that helpful here? We already talked about last week how to find the slope given a table, so I assumed that would be pretty easy. We just have to choose 2 points. Let's say this point here and this point here, right? And then we have to find our change in y, so we're going from 2 to 5, so that's a plus 3. And we go from -2 to 4, so that's a plus 6. And then to find our slope, m, we just take our change in y, which is 3, divided by our change in x, which is 6. So we get a slope of a half here. But the other stuff, well, not so much, right? So what about this whole y-intercept? Remember, it's the value of y when x is 0. So which one gives that to us? This says -6 and then 0, but the x is -6 and the y is 0. So we don't want that. Maybe we want this one that says when x is 0, y is 3. And that's our y-intercept. So when we write this equation, we have y equals 1/2 x. And we write 1/2 because that's the slope. And then our y-intercept is 3, so we write plus 3. And we're done. All right, let's try this next example where we know how to find the slope, but let's see if we can identify the y-intercept. Remember, it's the value of y when x is 0. Well, x is 0 right about... here. So that means our y-intercept is -1. Okay, so y equals, we don't know what the slope is yet, but we definitely know that we're going to have -1. All right, so let's take the next step in finding the slope. All right, remember it's the change in y. So go from 8 to 2, so that's 2 minus 8, which is -6. And we go from -3 to -1. -1 minus -3 is +2. So our change in y is -6. Change in x is 2. -6 divided by 2 is -3. So this equation is going to be -3x minus 1. All right, I am going to leave problem 3 for you to do, but I want to look at the fourth one down here. I want to look at that. All right, and I want to look at this because if we were looking for the y-intercept first, do you see a value for y when x is 0? I don't see one. However, I do see over here on the x side where we jump from negative to positive. So that means 0 is somewhere in between. So in order to find our y-intercept, we got to do a little bit of thinking here. 0 is right smack dab in the middle here for our x. So our y, if the change between -17 and -11 is +6, then for 0, we basically need to go halfway in between -17 and -11, since we go halfway in between to get 0 between -2 and 2. So -17 plus 3 is -14. So that's going to be our y-intercept. And then our change in y over our change in x, to find that, well, we know we're adding 6 over here on the y side. And over here on the x side, we're adding 4. So that leaves us with a slope of 6/4. So just to make room here, this equation would be y equals 3/2 x minus 14. And you may say, why 3/2 x? Well, 6/4 is simplified to 3/2. All right, now we're going to come over here. I'm going to skip the first one. I'm going to leave that one. But we're going to go over here to problem number 2, where it says, Daryl recently opened a savings account. He started his account with $1,000 and has been spending money and not saving. Daryl has $640 left after 9 months. Daryl withdraws an average of $40 a month. Remember, given the situation, we need to write an equation in slope-intercept form. So some things I want to note to you is that this equation, there's a lot inside of it, but the only thing we need to pay attention to is the fact that he started his account with $1,000 and that he consistently withdraws from it. And it says Daryl withdraws an average of $40 a month. Whenever we have, okay, this is the start amount, that's the y-intercept. Initial amount in a situation is always the y-intercept. So we're just going to put a y here. All right, put a y. And whenever we say, oh, it averages, oh, it's constantly decreasing at this rate. Or in this situation, at an average of $40 a month or per month. Anytime you see those things, it's slope. Okay, it's slope. Therefore, we're going to write an m here. So when we write this equation, we're going to write, first off, he starts with 1,000 and decreases. So instead of us writing, note that the rate is decreasing. That's what I'm going with that. All right, so if he decreases by $40 a month and he starts with 1,000, our slope is not positive 40 because he's not adding to the account. He's taking away. So this becomes negative 40x plus 1,000 because he starts with 1,000. All right, I'm going to leave this third one to you, but let's go to problem number 4. All right, it says we have time, which is given in days. So we got a day, 8 days, 15 days, 22 days. And then we have amount in gallons. So the first day was 3,555. The 8th day was 3,240. 15th day, 2,925. 22nd day, 2,610. Okay, clearly, as the days increase, the amount of gallons decrease. All right, so let's go ahead and find our slope because we can't right offhand determine what the y-intercept is. So we're going to find the slope. Note here, days is x, gallons is y. And when we go from 1 to 8, we add 7. All right, when we go from 3,555 to 3,240, we are decreasing by, let's see, where is my calculator? This is 315. So our change in y divided by our change in x gives us 45. So every day, the gallons decrease by 45. That's what our slope is. So m equals 45. We can use this slope to determine, to go back a day and see, okay, what amount did we even start with? All right, so we can do that by subtracting or actually adding 45 to 3,555. And that gives us 3,600. So on day 0, meaning the starting date, the number of gallons was 3,600. That's our y-intercept. So the equation is y equals, remember there is a decrease here, right? So maybe I should have written here negative 315. So it'll be negative 45x plus 3,600. That's my equation. If you have any questions, save it for class and we'll talk about it.